everyone. This is Defense Politics Asia, and welcome to the DPA Panels. And this time round, we're going to talk about a very, very serious topic, UFO. So this is going to be a very serious conversation on UFO, and the sponsor and organizer is Toby. So I will let Toby to take over the introduction. Toby, please.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Very Serious Persons Panel on UFOs. The idea here is to discuss not necessarily what we think of UFOs, but what we think of the media releases that have come out recently, and the strange situation where we now have government authorities, or at least people in positions of authority within government, seeming to confirm the existence of extraterrestrial life and technology, which is a pretty big deal, right? Like, for a whole bunch of reasons. So there's this strange situation in the world where previously, if you believed in UFOs and if you believed that Bob Lazar was telling the truth and that all this stuff existed, you were called a conspiracy theorist because you didn't believe what the government said. And now, if you don't believe in UFOs, you're the guy who thinks the government people are telling a big story. So there's been this really weird shift where the official story appears to be that there are UFOs, but there's still a lot of people who just simply don't believe it. And there's good reasons for that, right? Like, there's good reasons to be skeptical. The physics of interstellar travel is a little bit confounding because, you know, we don't know how you can travel fast enough to go between star systems. So, you know, there's good reasons why people are skeptical. There's also a whole industry around the UFO phenomenon, just as there's an industry around Superman and Spider-Man. So people are naturally skeptical of, a subject that would generate clicks and shows like this one, right? Just because there's money to be made there. So we're in this strange situation where it's like, you got to ask yourself, how would I even know? You know, like, if it were real, how would I know? There's people who say it's real, and there's people who say that it's not, unless an alien actually comes and like knocks on your door and says, hi, you know, you've been chosen for probing or something, right? Like, you know, and so it's very difficult. People could live and die and never know, right, if it's real or not. So this panel is just it's about just ordinary people's reaction to the current state of affairs, and particularly, you know, with David Grusch, the gentleman who's come out very recently and made apparently credible allegations that there are, in fact, alien bodies and alien technology in the possession of the US government and others. So anyway, that's the context. That's why we're doing this panel. It's just to have a chat with people who don't have any special knowledge and who aren't really don't have any agenda either in terms of like exploiting it for money, except Wyatt, of course. But that's the idea. So I'm just going to put some questions out, and then everybody can respond as they are interested or as they feel they have something to contribute. So to kick it off, I'll keep going on this idea, like, can the government keep secrets? Right? Because this is the whole thing about the whole conspiracy theory label. A lot of people say, and I tend to sympathize with this view, that governments are not good at keeping secrets. There's too many people. There's too much turnover of people. There's no real historical record of governments keeping secrets. Governments are usually in the business of promoting narratives too, which is like the opposite of keeping secrets. Then there's another thing too on this issue of secrets, which you guys might want to talk about, which is that there is a popular argument that I followed for a long time, which said the government is no good at keeping secrets, and therefore there are no UFOs because they couldn't keep it secret. But that's a weird argument, right? Because arguably they haven't kept it secret, right? Arguably Bob Lazar revealed it. Arguably people have known about it, and arguably the government did fail to keep it secret, right? Because governments can't keep things secret. So it's a funny argument, you know. It presumes something that isn't actually true, which is that the government kept this all secret and that nobody's had any inkling about it. In fact, people have been claiming to know about it from government sources since forever. So, okay, so I'll put that out there. do you guys think that governments can keep secrets? And do you think they have?
Do a quick introduction of yourself before you reply, so that because we didn't do the introduction round. Unmute.
Shall I go first and then we go around? Yeah, so I'm Drew, I'm from Singapore, and I've been on some panels before, so I guess some of the audience knows who I am. I'd like to state first and foremost that I believe they're aliens, that they are real, and then I hope we can get into what kind of aliens they are. But on the government, I think we have many instances of governments keeping secrets, and then those secrets get spilled out later on, like decades later. Like the example that comes to mind would be the U.S. government funding the Tibetan rebels and the Dalai Lama, and then in the 1960s, and then about 10 or 20 years ago, because of the Open Secrets Act or something like that, then they published that on the State Department website and say, yeah, they did, but they kept that secret for like 20 or 30 years. So if they can keep, funding a black ops operation against China for 30 years quiet, I don't see why they can't keep aliens quiet. And yeah, there have been leaks. It's just nobody believes them. So they just call them conspiracy theories and crazy people. So yeah, those leaks to me some of them sound credible. Of course, some of them are out there to make money, of course. But some of them seems logical. Yeah. So I think governments do try to keep secrets, and sometimes they fail. And then when they fail, they just try to discredit the people that leaked the information. Vaun?
Yeah, I'm Vaun. I live in Kentucky. I've always had an interest in UFOs, and I don't really know if there's aliens or not, but because I'm open to the idea that there's this technology, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around the fact that some government would have technology that advanced and no one else would even have any idea about it or clue, or because the Russians don't really seem worried about it, or the Chinese. I mean, it doesn't appear. You don't hear the Chinese government. You don't see an Air Force guy coming out talking about UFOs. So I'm sure it happens over there, but maybe they know it's American shit flying around and not aliens. Whereas here it plays to, the defense industry. Maybe, I don't know. We got to spend money on the next threat, whatever this threat is. I mean, we can go into it with the panel. I mean, I don't really want to get into what aliens could or couldn't be until we go further into it, but I'm really looking forward to the panel.
I'm Archimedes. I'm a bit newer to the DPA open mic extended universe, but it's great. I'm from America. What I will say is that I think that governments do keep secrets. I think that the Russian and Chinese governments are probably much better at keeping secrets than the American government. However, when something is leaked from the American government, I think that the American government has a very profound ability to kind of flood the information space with noise and, with conspiracy theories, with fake leaks, with making people call each other liars on the internet and in person, right? So at a certain point, it doesn't really matter if a leak actually goes through. It's kind of like the boy who cried wolf, There's such a lack of trust in reality in general now that it's actually a very effective defense against leaks. So it's like a blanket that covers the government and protects them from those secrets being released. So I personally think that aliens 100% exist. I'm not sure if they've actually visited the United States of America or even planet Earth, but I think it's fairly likely. I do think it's fairly likely, and I think that the government probably has seen something in the last 100 years.
I'm Melkor. Thanks to the guys who let me on the panel here. I'm originally from Northern Ireland. I live in Canada. On the whole alien question, I'm fairly confident there probably is something out there, like something different than us, just given the enormous size of the universe and multiverse and whatever, right? So there's chances are there's something out there, but just given the extreme distances and time that it would take to travel that, I don't know if it's likely that any technological civilizations could be existing at the same time, given the time frame. It's a possibility. We've been visited in the past. It's a possibility we're being visited now, but I just think that if we were, like, that's a secret that's so huge that that there's just no way that it would be able to be kept a secret. And these dribs and drabs and little bits and pieces that have come out over the last, few months and years really don't fits more with some sort of like disinformation campaign to my mind, but that thing, and that's just the way I think about it. And as far as governments keeping secrets, they can keep them pretty well. Like the whole, like the Vietnam War was, started on a lie, and and it took a long time before that came out. But they can keep secrets when it suits them. But yeah, that's about it for me for now.
Yeah, so my turn. So I'm Atreyo. I'm originally from Suriname, now living in Taiwan. As far as alien goes, I think we should look at ourselves as an example that different species around the universe should exist, simply because the fact that we exist. And then if you think about it, the vastness of the universe, and then also the planetary systems around suns or stars, would make it possible for planets to be habitable by species rather similar to us or different from us, but still a species that can thrive. For the UFO aspect of it, I think we will come to that later. But for the question that was posed, the governments keeping secrets, I would say they would keep secrets when need be, but over time exposure does tend to come, whether discredited phenomenon like Drew mentioned. I think this also can play a role into how the information space would work, simply because the government and or political parties have enough power to actually dilute information coming into the known or the rest of the world. So I would say aliens exist, governments can keep secret, and once something leaks out, it can be covered either by way of judging it as conspiracy or whatever. And that's it for me.
Hi, I'm Wyatt. I'm the managing editor for Defense Politics Asia. Yep. And yeah, I'm a semi-believer in ancient alien theories. So yeah, I'm the huge fan of the History Channel, the series of show, which is like so repetitive. But if you actually look at how the governments deal with, for example, COVID pandemic, how they withhold information, how they avoid talking about certain things, be it whether the vaccine works or the implication, the side effects, or these things, and there is implications because governments have to make a very very difficult divisions between telling you things that you may not like it versus national stability. So something as huge as a government claiming that the alien exists and they have visited Earth could actually potentially mess up the whole world, everything. It will change literally everything that we know. Suddenly, everything, all the fights, all the geopolitical fights means nothing. The money means nothing, and it's bad for business. It's also messed up the whole bureaucracy because people fight for years and decades to be in their positions, and suddenly aliens exist. No, now we do not need senators. because now we just want to become one global government to deal with alien civilization that may or may not kill us. And then people will start to talk about should we be developing weapons to deal with intergalactic war? That might happen, and suddenly fighting with China or Russia makes no sense. It's just way too much implications, too complicated, and most likely the aliens are not evil. If they do exist, because if not, we have been wiped out by now, or maybe we are just not important to them because they can just and we are dead. So I personally subscribe to it, the alien theory, the ancient alien theory, because of the anomaly of what human beings are. But we can talk about that later. Toby, you're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. Muted.
Toby, can't hear you.
I didn't. You muted me, man. Okay, so no, I was going to say that's exactly actually what I wanted to go into. That's a brilliant segue. Pity I muted it and stuffed it up. But like this idea of human genesis, because what Wyatt said is quite true. Humans are pretty unusual on planet Earth. Over the geological history of the Earth, every manner of creature has walked and swum and flown and crawled over the surface of the Earth, and they've all had two eyes, more or less, and they've all been very earthly in their way. And then along come human beings who have this thing that they call a spirit, for want of a better word, a sentience that is able to contemplate and ask questions. And that's odd, and I think the way Wyatt put that is very right. It's very unusual, right? And so this has fueled a lot of alien seeding hypotheses, the idea that alien astronauts came down to Earth and they created mankind. This takes us into what I wanted to talk about next, which is, if we ask ourselves how many people in the world already believe in aliens, well, it's a little bit semantics, right? Because Wyatt said everything would be disrupted. And that's kind of true, but in a way it wouldn't be, because if you think about all the people who believe in the Abrahamic religions, so all the Muslims, all the Christians, and all the Jews, all the people who subscribe to the book of Genesis, well, I'm Christian myself, I don't mean to cause offense, but Genesis is an alien story, right? Like the Elohim, the heavenly beings came down from the sky, right? Not from under the earth, but they came down from space, the sky, heavens, and they made mankind, right, in their image. And Genesis talks about the Elohim, the heavenly beings. So whether you call these beings angels or whether you call them space people or aliens is largely semantics. The story is the same. Entities, sentient entities from the sky, from space, came to the earth and created humanity, right? So whether or not you believe that this is divinely inspired, or whether you believe in an atheistic conception of alien beings doing it as a lab experiment, you're essentially believing the same story, which is that the genesis of humanity's sentience and our exceptional nature relative to the natural world is actually a project of the aliens. And this would also explain, to some extent, if you subscribe to this theory, it would also explain not only the differences between humanity and all the hominids that came before, but it would also explain a great deal of religious theory, and it would also explain why aliens might be watching us and not interfering too much. Because someone who says, well, why don't they make contact? Well, if you subscribe to Christianity or Islam for that matter, you could say, well, they did, right? Like they did. Jesus Christ and Muhammad were bringing the message from heaven, right? From space. And a lot of witnesses who have reported contact with aliens have suggested that their method of communication is telepathic, right? Now, telepathy sounds a lot crazier before you start listening to Elon Musk talk about brain implants, right? And then suddenly it becomes like a technological thing. So if telepathy exists, how would you know the difference between an angel giving you a vision, right? And again, we come into semantics, and an alien giving you instruction, right? Like it becomes a question of semantics. And so what I'm getting at here is like, how much of the world already believes that we are actually bioengineered by space creatures? And whether you call them aliens or angels is just that, because arguably a great deal of humanity already believes this. And this raises another issue that you guys might want to talk about, which is that given that so many people already believe this fundamental story, does that mean that there's a market for it? Does that mean that, like, you know, people are going to believe this no matter what the evidence is against it? I'm kind of surprised that so many of you are leaning towards belief in it. My own position, I didn't clarify it. My own position is I tend to be very skeptical, but at the same time, my background with the law has led me to, I've witnessed a lot of people telling a lot of lies, right? Like,
well, you're lying, Toby. Your tag.
Well, no, I have.
Look at your tag. It says true believer. So
yeah,
either what you're saying is lying or what you typed is lying.
Well, I am a Christian, so I confess I kind of like, I do subscribe to what I'm like with Wyatt. We are a very strange creature on Earth, right? Like, so if you were, let's just say hypothetically you were an alien and you visited the Earth every 200 million years for the past 2 billion years, so that's 10 trips, right? Well, for the first 9 trips, it'd just be the Earth, and there'd be all these creatures crawling around on it and eating each other and having a good old time, and none of them would be making art. And then on the last trip, when you rock up and you see humans and human civilization, you might think, what happened there? You know, that's a bit odd. That's a bit of a change. It's a bit radical. So human beings we're not really earthly in that sense. We don't follow the patterns that were established by billions of years of evolution on Earth. So that's one thing. But this idea that everybody believes this theory anyway, it's like, to what extent would it disrupt human affairs? And do people believe this anyway? And does that create a market for the story, whether or not it's true? So I'll put that out there and let you guys talk.
Okay. Can I go? First, I
So
actually
we're changing direction now.
No, I was originally beside you, and then I wanted to unmute myself, and then I hit Leave Studio instead. So now
Right, I'm going to mute myself.
Technologically, not very inclined. So I actually wanted to add on to Wyatt's original point, which is that, you know, the governments don't actually want to change the status quo by letting us know that aliens exist, because I think that's a very good idea. If everybody realizes that there is this alien civilization, that they might be out to get us, you know, the enemy would become this extraterrestrial that all of humanity can then work together to kind of improve our technological capabilities to eventually defeat if it comes to that, you know. So I think it's good for humanity that we all subscribe to this idea that there are aliens out there. It will unite us and give us an enemy to fight, even though we don't actually know whether they are an enemy or not. And this I think this whole, and also just during the introductory round, I think at least 3 of you mentioned that it's difficult to understand that there might be aliens around because of the large distances or whatnot. But I think we're actually missing the fact that there are actually 3 types of aliens that we are, and you are all talking about the aliens from other planets of the universe, but actually 2 other types of aliens that we might actually be out there and encounter. One is the type, the dimensional type of alien, which is what was shown in the movie Interstellar. You remember the movie where the guy, was it Conor McGregor or something like that?
Michael McConaughey.
Yes,
that'd be a very different movie with Conor McGregor in it.
yes. Matthew McConaughey. So basically, what he's talking about is dimensional aliens, and what that is basically, so we live in 3 dimensions, right? So a good example is we cannot see 4th dimension, but the 4th dimension can see us, and we live in 3rd dimension, so we can see the 2 dimension. So for example, I'm holding up 3 fingers now, right? Is it possible for me to draw a line between these 3 fingers to separate out one from the other 2? It's not possible because this is on 2 dimensions. But if I add 1 dimension, and I can draw a line in the middle there, you see? So that's 3 dimensions. So if we go from 3 dimensions to then 4 dimensions, we can't even perceive it because we live in the 3-dimensional world. So there could be 4th-dimensional aliens looking at us right now. And in the movie, the 4th dimension was time. So they show it like each 3D was a pocket of time. And then the guy was just swimming along and looking at each pocket of time, right? So that's the dimensional aliens. Then there's the phase aliens, which is we are living in this world, but there's an infinite number of the same world where every possibility happens, and that's the Marvel multiverse kind of concept, where they jump from one phase to the next phase, and then in this world, Superman is a woman, and then in the next world, Batman is actually a cat girl or whatever, right? So that's the phase aliens. So the technological aspect of it, doesn't really come in when you're talking about 4th dimension aliens, because they can already see us, they can interact with us if they want to, and they chosen not to. But the phase dimension also gets past the whole, we can't travel faster than the speed of light thing, because they're already here with us. They're just one phase apart. So if they found the technology to kind of transverse this phase, they can actually pop into our world and pop back in, pop out. And that explains a lot of the like the fast-moving UFOs. They go from one point to the next very quickly. They could simply just pop back into their face and pop back out somewhere else in our world. You see?
Yeah, I think people of the fans of Warhammer 40,000 would know very, very well about all these theories, because they literally have all these laws and explanations of how these different kind of species works. They have demons and they all go to interdimension, which I do not know very, very well. I only watch on YouTube to try to understand the complexity of all these things. And I was hoping
to get into the dimensionality argument in 40K later, but Drew's kind of ruined it. But look, I'm going to let the other guys talk. But since Drew has ruined it, I'm just going to say this: I struggle with this idea of dimensionality and phase, because I don't understand the difference between that and imagination. For a start, I'd say the 4th dimension is time, right? But I get the broad concept. But if these things exist, which are borderline magic, then I don't see why we can't believe in faster than light travel that we just don't understand how to do. But if that reality is a thing, if there are phases and a multiverse, then it begs the question, what is imagination? Because it is actually possible for a human being to drag something out of the warp, to use the Warhammer 40K, right? To take something from the conceptual realm and make it manifest in the material realm, right? We do it when we build helicopters, right? When we imagine a point, which is an infinitesimally small entity, that's not real. That's not a real thing. That's a conceptual thing, right? It exists in the imagination, yet we use it in engineering, right, to calculate forces. We human beings have this almost godlike ability to reach into the warp and to take things from the conceptual realm. And again, this is semantics. Is that dimensional travel, right? When we remember the past, we're traveling back in time. When we predict the future, right? It also raises the question, what is inspiration and where does that come from? So this talk of dimensionality, at this point, this is where I go full Warhammer 40K, right? And I'm just like, yep, that's the warp. And all of the retardation in the world today is going to give rise to a new chaos god of retardation and bad ideas. And that's happening, because in a way, we do make the conceptual world with our imaginations, and then we do drag that into the material plane. That's what's so weird about us, right? So anyway, that's where we're going with 40K. But I'll turn it over to you other guys and mute myself. Thanks, Drew.
I think that, Drew, your point is very important to keep in mind, that there are these other conceptions of aliens, but those are kind of based on non-scientific or extra scientific phenomena, right? We really don't understand imagination like that. We understand that we have a dimensionality, but we don't necessarily have evidence for higher dimensionality. I know that there's string theory, which is 26 dimensions and so on, and technically we live in a 4-dimensional universe, but we don't really have a physical experience that we can reproduce and look at and write a paper about any of these other types of aliens. And that makes it, I think, very different, especially when you're looking at it from the social side of things, compared to the actual flesh and blood aliens, or maybe not flesh and blood, but one way or another, these are real physical things that exist in our 3 dimensions of space and time that came down here, that you can touch them, hypothetically, that they eat or they gain energy somehow, and they shit somehow, and they reproduce somehow, and they grow old somehow. They do these things, right? They're just like us. And I think that that has a very different psychological impact on people, because if it is true, as the Ancient Aliens guys say, that a lot of our founding myths, that Zeus and Hera and Jesus and Muhammad were all people that came, that were alien people that came to the earth and delivered some message and interacted with us, or implanted something within people, or elevated monkeys into people somehow. If we were to now realize that these are actual flesh and blood creatures that we can touch, I think that would cause a severe break in the ego of a lot of people. It would make a lot of people feel extremely insignificant and weak. And I don't think that it would unite people against a greater enemy, but it would be like waking up as a 4-year-old and realizing that your parents have killed themselves or something like that. It would be it would be like a complete collapse of your worldview for all the people in the world.
It would humble a lot of people. And I think a lot of people need to be humbled.
Yeah, sure. But I don't think that it would be like us unifying against an enemy, right? It would collapse society. People would lose their minds, I think.
The way I look at it is, like, can you imagine, like, the way a chimpanzee looks at us? Like, so chimpanzees are fairly, like, they're smart. Like, they're going through their stone age right now. We're watching the evolution of a species that's very, very close to us. And they're following along basically the same pattern we followed. It just took them longer to get there. So they're developing language. They're developing a way of teaching their young, and building a tradition in their societies. Like, they're warlike, like we were. They're very, very similar. So that's why the Ancient Aliens thing, where some alien came down and, like, bestowed some special knowledge on us, I don't buy that at all. I think it's just evolution in the way it works. Like, some species are just more suited to sentience. And, like, if you're ever in a zoo and you look into the eyes of a gorilla, like, it's basically a person. Like, we may not be able to communicate because they can't form speech the way we can, but people can teach them sign language and communicate with them. But the way they would look at us and the technology we have, like like they would consider us like something special, alien to them, because we're so far beyond what they at the moment, because of their lack of language, they can't conceptualize these ideas. It's only because we have language that we can even conceptualize the idea of a species from another world. So I think it's likely. I think it's very unlikely that they've ever been here. I think it's very unlikely that we'll ever know for sure whether they exist or not. I just don't think that our civilization is going to last long enough for us to be able to. Well, maybe, hopefully, we will, but I know the way things are going right now, it's not looking very good for us. So, it may be that the aliens turn up and say, "Hang on, guys, like, leave those nukes alone. Like, don't be messing with those anymore. Like, just chill out there." But I think that the idea of something like in a different dimension, like, for an alien to exist, for an alien species to exist, it had to evolve. It didn't just puff into existence. If it did just puff into existence, then it's not an alien race. It's something else entirely. So that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, I want to hop in right there. So basically, what Melkor was mentioning about the chimpanzees. So chimpanzees actually have concepts of language. It's just that we don't conceptualize them as a particular language, because their way of communicating is based off of sound. And what Melkor also mentions is that they are actually going through their form of Stone Age, like we used to. But they have concepts. of governance. They even have concept of a perception of democracy. And then you have war, culture, because not all the chimpanzees in the same region actually practice the same culture. So they are very well developed in their mind. And then scientists also even have proven that there is dreams. So chimpanzees, even bonobos and gorillas have dreams. It's just that we need to put machines on them in order to perceive if they are dreaming or not. So technology helps us to understand what the apes are doing. But also, if you look at us, the humans, we tend to forget that before us there were series and versions of humans, and next to the Homo sapiens there were actually other versions of hominid species. It's just that they got extinct. For example, the Neanderthals, they were perceived as more intelligent than the Homo sapiens. It's because they had bigger brains. Their language system was also more sophisticated than ours. But then also they have the Denisovans. There is a species in the Indonesian islands. They were the longest to
Pygmies.
survive. Yeah, exactly. But so you had a lot of different species, and then by way of DNA sequencing, they have also discovered there were human or hominin species that cannot be traced simply because there hasn't been any evidence, or rather, they haven't found bones or anything that they could use to track them. But they are like a black dot in either our DNA or the DNA that they found in Neanderthals or the Denisovans. So they can identify many different kinds of human-like or hominin species in the process, and then also over a period of time. So you could see is that what Melkor is mentioning is that there is a sequence of evolution, and then if you compare it to other animals, you can see comparable evolutions as well. So in that way, I would say aliens would have probably not been the main cause of our intelligence. It's just as the offsets and the prerequisites just made us the most prime for developing in such a way where intelligence or cognitive development seemed to be more prone. It's because if you look at other primates, so monkeys, in this case, I would preferably look at baboons, for example, which is in line much closer to, for example, chimpanzees. The baboons tend to not develop the same phenomenons that the chimpanzees are doing, but they are very close in line either way. If you look at their physical capabilities, but also in their habitat, but then also in their general environment. So you could see that there is still nurturing conditions that need to happen. And then to jump away from evolution theory and then into the alien spectrum, I would say is that if aliens were to come, what about the concept of Columbus? Because consider is that within our galaxy, we have at least figured out that we are the only intelligent species at the moment. So that would mean that if aliens were to come, they need to come from another galaxy into ours. That would mean that their technology would be superior either way, and we would be able to be colonized as a slave race or a slave species or exploitable, as we would be in the way on this planet that might have resources that others would lack. But then I would be in in the realm of speculations. But then consider is that we are expendable for extraterrestrial beings that have superior technology. We can have all the nukes we want. But if they can travel from galaxy to galaxy, they could have something far more superior than ours anyway. So I think if we were ever to meet aliens, we would go extinct by default simply because of the fact that we are inferior in their regards.
Yeah, so I want to go back to what Archimedes was talking about the how if we realize these gods are just flesh and blood like us, the people who are relating to the religions, and then we will feel inferior. I think it's the opposite. I think we will feel like the gods are nothing because they are just same as us. They're just living things. The gods to us is like something very vague and very powerful. Immortals, can't be killed, this kind of thing. So, and when you realize that they are just like us, it's a bit like the white superiority complex. Like the Europeans started colonizing the world, then every other culture is like, wow, all these white people are so powerful, and then it took a major war between Russia and Japan, the naval battle, that they realized, oh, the Europeans can be defeated. Then suddenly the entire facade just break, and by today standard, the entire Western superiority the complex is already gone. It's entirely smashed. So I do not think that when we realize aliens are or the gods relating to the Christian or Judaism origin religions, these gods or beings come down, we will feel inferior. I don't think so. But what I think would happen, it will destroy the religions. And it will destroy the religions in a very peculiar way. It's not about superior or their flesh and blood. It's more like, what if the angels came down and then they are actually the grace? Can you imagine? Your minds will get blown. It's like, hi, I'm the angel. I'm like I actually do not know the angels' names. Like, I'm Gabriel. He's a gray with big eyes and very tiny hands and legs. Like, what the?
Just imagining someone being like, "Oh, I'm a huge fan. Can I get your autograph?"
Yeah, but the thing is, they look totally different because if you look at how people, especially European Christianity, they project how Jesus looked like. They drew Jesus as a white guy, but he's never a white guy. He was a Middle Eastern guy. Right.
Yeah, so it's the projection of their concept of perfect, right? Because if you look at the phases, if you look at, for example, the Roman gods, the god of Jupiter, if you see his face, all curly, very stirred and very wide face, strong jaw lines. So what you see in many gods is that the portrayal of the gods or their deities tend to be closer to the fantasy of their way of perfect.
Exactly.
If you look at angels, if you go to Italy and then look at the chapels, their angels are always in the image of what would be perfect.
All the white kids, they're all the white kids, small little white kids with curly hairs, right? So because you see, if we do that to Jesus, okay, and I can tell you that they do that to the Buddha as well. The Buddha looks different in every single country in Asia.
Buddha looks like a fat
No,
guy.
that's one of them.
Okay, guys,
how is that perfection?
let's bring Vaun in here.
Different.
We skipped Vaun and he's too polite.
Let Vaun go.
Vaun.
You're muted,
yourself.
Vaun.
Unmute yourself.
You're mute.
Unmute.
I can hear you.
Vaun, you're muted.
I was gonna say, when it comes to like let's just say the flesh and blood aliens, I kind of am more along the lines with Toby as far as that could be the reason why you have reports of angels and Adam and Eve being created. I mean, I'm a Christian, but it doesn't really bother me that people misinterpreted alien spaceships and aliens to be God and angels. I mean, it's simpleton people. They're going to explain things the way they are. I mean, it's not like some Joseph's going to be sitting in a village somewhere in like, the Middle East and going, oh, check out the phased array warp drive on that. I mean, it's a flying machine, tank, they talk, like people talk about Revelations being futuristic, and they talk about horses that spew, sulfur. And some people, oh, that must be tanks. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe there was some horses that fucking shot fire out of their faces. I mean, we're talking about God and angels. I mean, if they can fly across the galaxy, surely they can make some idiot in a cave in a loincloth think that there's a horse breathing fire. I mean, it's the same thing with the, like the Greek mythology and stuff like that. Maybe that stuff going on about Medusa and all that, maybe it didn't happen exactly like that, but they didn't know how else to describe this hideous thing that these dudes came down from the sky and created, and it didn't work out. I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea that they experimented and screwed up and there was things that people remember. And now that's why you got mythology and I think it would mess with Christianity in the sense that, or any of the other Abrahamic religions, like, because we're all kind of led to believe that the earth and the human race is God's chosen project, and it's all here, and that might mess with people to think that there's other projects going on. But if you really think about God in a more, like, if you think about it in a way, because you can't really think like him, he's God. He can do whatever he wants. So if he wants to play over here and have Earth, and he wants to play over there and have Romulan land and Klingons and Vulcan, that's his business, right? I thank you for letting me exist. So the idea of the alien, it would mess with things because there is power and stuff based in that religious teaching, I could see that messing with people's power bases, like Wyatt was saying, politics. Who needs senators when we need a galactic federation? So, there could be things like that. But for me personally, I would be shocked and surprised and amazed, but at the same time, it'd be like, well, I guess that's why they thought that was an angel, because that gray dude has wings and flies around with like a golden lightsaber or something, That's what I'm saying. They don't know they didn't know it was a lightsaber. They just saw a golden sword or the shaft of light, but it's really a laser beam. That's the thing. It's and people get all mad about that, but it's like, that could be why you have stuff like that today, because back then they didn't know what to call it. So they just called it what they thought it was based on the knowledge they had then. So, the whole idea that they've been here or could have been here, that's entirely possible, and it seems reasonable. Based on the legends and the myths, because a lot of it doesn't make sense. There's all kinds of hieroglyphs and stuff of things in the sky that look like things that some guy saw 5 minutes ago flying a 747 from LA to Tokyo. So, it's what the Egyptian guys in on the hoax 2,000 years ago. So there's obviously something that's been going on, and I just think a lot of the legends and myths like that, if aliens are out there and coming, that's probably where they came from, because people wouldn't know what to think if they saw some big ship come landing and dudes get off and do whatever.
Atreyo, I'll come to you just momentarily. I just want to, off what Vaun was saying, make a point here, and that is that he makes a very, very good point that's supported by linguistic analysis, which was something I studied back in the day. Languages are not the same sizes, particularly when they're not yet written down. The tribal societies arguably have 5,000 to 10,000 words, and most of them are for rocks and sticks. They don't have the mechanism to describe a carburetor or an internal combustion engine or a fusion drive. They don't have the words. And so looking at stories about magic, right? You don't have to talk about aliens. If you go to tribal people in the world today and get them to describe a camera or a rifle, they are going to describe it in their own way, right, as best they can. You can also see this in a lot of Chinese literature, because it's so old, Chinese literature. It's very, very old, right? You've got people who are highly intelligent who are having to describe complex systems that they understand, and the language is very poetic, right? It's based on nature, and you get a lot of parables with nature. The 1,000 birds fly in the 10 directions and so on. And what these Chinese scholars are actually talking about is scientific phenomena a lot of the time, right? And if you can get past the language that they had to use, because it was all they had, you can start to understand that they're actually developing their language, and that's where new words come from. So Vaughn's quite correct here. We can't look at bad descriptions from people who had limited vocabularies and conclude that they're making stuff up, right? And this is something I wanted to talk about earlier too. From my background, my pitiful background in the law, listening to a lot of people tell a lot of lies, you kind of get a feel for liars, right? Lying has its own way and path, and some people sound like liars and some people don't, right? And this is, and I was going to ask you guys what you think about three people in particular. One, David Grusch, who's the guy who came out recently. Bob Lazar, who has received so much attention, but also David Fravor, the pilot who encountered the Tic Tac UFO. And the reason I mentioned David Fravor is because this is what actually tipped me over the edge and caused me to start being a believer in the phenomena, because I've met guys like Dave Fravor, right? He's a commander on a US aircraft carrier. That's not a humorous profession. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of people. It's a lot of welfare and danger. How you get a guy like that who's got a family and a dog, and you know, how you get a guy like that who's so well educated and trained to come into a big hoax and start hoaxing people, like for what? For clicks on YouTube? Like, I don't, at that point, right, when I see a man like that who is as credible as that, if you start telling me that he's part of a big hoax and so are all of his flight crew and everybody around him, that's where I draw the line. And at some point you do have to decide, you know, who you believe. And my feeling also, seeing Bob Lazar on Joe Rogan, I've like I said, you know, I'm a cynical person. I don't believe anybody who tells me anything. I'm looking at the angle, right? I find Bob Lazar to be a very credible witness indeed. He does not smell like a liar. Now, I could be entirely wrong there, but I'm just saying that's my opinion. I think testimony has weight, and I think at some point, given David Grusch, David Fravor, Commander Fravor, and Bob Lazar, and these other people, like I've seen people I don't believe either, like talking about alien bases in Antarctica as well, and I'm thinking, yeah, you know what, I think you're selling a book. But there's also the case of the children who witnessed the UFOs both in Australia and also in Africa. I've watched the testimony from those people, and also from the case in Virginia, I think, in Brazil. I have seen far too much testimony, and I think the video medium is important here too. Like, because I've seen it, I've watched these people. I've seen far too much testimony, which strikes me as credible, and I've entertained the possibility that they're part of a big conspiracy and hoax. And at that point, right, like, I find it easier to believe in dimensionality travel and warp drives, things I don't even understand. So I do think that, you know, we have to give some weight to the credibility. And I think this is what is actually changing a lot of people's minds. They don't see how the hoax is possible. Bob Lazar's story has been too consistent and has been backed up by other corroborating testimony, right? So yeah. There was one other thing that I wanted to talk about, and that was on the issue of religion.
Shall we let Atreyo go first?
Yeah. I'm just going to mention that, and then I'll let you all go again. But this is something that was talked about that I think is missed. This idea of evolution and what is different about humanity. I want to say something here, because I wasn't raised a Christian. I was raised in a very scientific household, and I've actually read The Origin of Species and Dawkins and know a little bit about evolutionary theory. And we ought not be deceived by evolutionary theory, because there's some mysteries there, right? And one of them, for example, is the eyeball, right? If you listen to Dawkins talk about the evolution of the eyeball, it's very interesting. He's a very erudite man, and he presents it very well. And anyone who wants to get to grips with evolutionary theory should listen to him, because he's very sincere. And so he argues that the principle of evolution is that which is useful is retained, and that which is useful is discarded, right? And this is the unconscious process, the clockwork orange grinding away. And so this is how Dawkins explains why the eyeball has evolved 12 different times independently in the fossil record. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's what he says, and I believe him. Here's the problem, right? If that which is useful is that which is retained, if evolution favors that which is useful, has there ever been a more useful evolutionary jump than language and sentience? And so if evolutionary theory is to be consistent, we ought to have expected sentience to have arisen through natural selection numerous times, like the eyeball, but it hasn't. And so here we get into a very interesting distinction between humanity and creatures that do not have language. And we've heard these other gentlemen talk about language and so on and so forth. But one thing that I have learned from Christian pastors, from the question, do dogs have a soul, right? Because like, I like dogs and I'm curious, do they go to heaven? Because I think they should. So do dogs have a soul? And it was put to me that there is a distinction between the spirit and the soul. And so living creatures have souls, but what makes humans unique is the spirit, all right? And I'd never heard this before, so it's an interesting distinction, because as Christians, we're taught that that which is of the spirit is of the spirit, and that which is of the flesh is of the flesh. And we're taught that the Holy Spirit and our God is a spiritual thing, right? And this is like going into the warp of 40K, or you could use other semantics and say it's imaginary. Our God is imaginary, but the thing about the imaginary realm is it can become manifest in the material world, and we are the conduits for that. And so in a way, you know, like you talk about animals and apes and all the rest of it, they don't bury their dead. Like, they don't have a need to connect with the imaginary man in the sky, right? And one of the things that defines the human being on Earth is our religion. We do seem to have a part of us that wants to reach out into the conceptual realm, the imaginary realm, the other dimensions of Drew. And that is what the Christians call the Holy Spirit, right? And the Muslims for that matter. And you know, so this idea of spiritualism, it's built into all cultures. And I would say that spiritualism does distinguish humanity. We build temples, we worship gods, we ask extremely odd questions, and we have podcasts like this one, right, where we are inherently curious about the imaginary world. And so that's where I kind of make a hard distinction between the animal life on Earth and human beings. And anyway, I'll leave it there, but maybe you guys want to talk about Bob Lazar, Dave Fravor, and what you think about the testimony that's been offered recently.
Well, when it comes to the pilot, I'll just say real quick, like, you know, he's got to have he's got credibility. Plus, he's got the footage. I mean, my dad was a pilot. You know, I was in the Guard pilots. I mean, that's a very serious bunch of guys. They're not going to risk their careers. They're not going to risk flight status by getting involved in shit that you could say they were having mental issues, which would be a reason to take your flight status. I mean, that's one thing. Those guys. That's like my dad. He's 75 years old. Still flies whenever he can. That's his fucking love in his life. I mean, if he dies in a plane crash, I'll know he died fucking happy because he was flying when he died, you know? And I mean, that's his whole life. That's all the guys I know from him that are his friends that are pilots are all like that. And I mean, I think I've asked him before, and I think the only thing he said he ever thought he saw was what he thought was the Aurora surveillance aircraft flying in. He was coming back from, I think, India or something, and they were coming into LA, and something was flying over them and going fast enough that it passed them. And he said its trajectory, he thought it would land in Nevada, but he didn't think it was a UFO. He just figured that's what it was, like, you know, the SR-71 type plane, if it exists or whatever. But those guys don't, I mean, because if you start talking about stuff like that and people think you're crazy, you're going to lose your flight status. So, and for a long time in the military and in commercial, there was a stigma attached to even talking about something you saw, even if you really saw something. I mean, if the whole damn plane saw it and nobody knows what it is, but you're not going to say nothing because you don't want to have the FAA come and talk to you, or the NTSB or whoever, and maybe have your license suspended or something, or maybe you have to go get evaluated now. I mean, so when pilots say they see stuff, especially nowadays, especially a military pilot, I would take that as being a legitimate sighting of something, you know, whatever. He doesn't know what it was, but he obviously saw something. He's not making it up. He's not going to risk that career he built.
Atreyo.
And Bob Lazar, I mean, he's been around forever, and I think he's legit. Oh, sorry. And the other guy, I mean, all that stuff that just came out, I mean, it seems credible, so I don't really have any issues with anything they're saying.
Atreyo.
Oh shit. Yeah, no, Toby was making too many points to follow up. I tried to make notes, but yeah, there were too many. So basically, I think with animals, there's a misconception that they don't have language or any form or way of communication. So the concept is that we produce sound. It's just that we can organize our sounds in such a way that we can interpret it in extreme details that we call a language. But if you look at other mammals, so even if you want to look at chimpanzees, actually they do communicate very extensively, which would be considered in form of a language. But also look at animals like dolphins, whales, orcas, and such, which are also animals with a high intelligence. So they have very significant sound forms that could be organized and be interpreted as languages. But if you look at lesser sophisticated developed brains, or perceived as lesser sophisticated, cat species do use sound to distinguish emotions from one another and use that as a form of communication. But also, if you look at elephants, elephants have very significant ways of using sound to communicate that we could interpret it as language. But then also on the other topic of how we use rituals and religion and concepts of those. Actually, various animals have form of rituals when they are suffering a loss in the form of a death. So, for example, chimpanzees perform a very extensive ritual to respect and mourn their dead. And then also other animals have shown very significant amount of signs of mourning. So it's an emotional state that they are portraying when they lose
Elephants do a lot of it.
Elephants
too,
especially.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
especially.
Elephants
There
have...
is- There's
Yeah,
videos, of the elephants going, walking like 10, 20 kilometers to meet, to go to the funeral of the former handler who passed away. And they kind of understood that this was the former handler, and they paid the respect. It's from India. And then, then he turned around. And then it was posted on YouTube. Or YouTube or social media. It went viral because the elephant literally, you can tell the elephant is mourning as well.
Yes, but if you prove that an elephant is not a cabbage, you have not proved that an elephant is a man.
But,
But the thing is
I got
that
the
the
difference-
rituals and the emotions exist in other animals. So
Nobody said they didn't, right? Show me the temple. Show me the chimpanzees. Show me the ritual burial.
What about?
Well, this is what people look for
when
when people look at the hominid record, right? What they're looking for is ritual burial, right? They're looking for religious practice.
Neanderthals have ritual burial.
And because that's right, they did, right? And so this is why a lot of the alien hypotheses talk about very odd guesswork, and they're saying, like the Annunaki came down and they made a whole bunch of different versions of people, and then they scrapped the Neanderthal because they smelt bad, and the Denisovans got hungry and ate everything. And so there's all these theories, right? But I agree with you. I've also read that the Neanderthals had a certain spirituality. But I would say that, and listen, I don't necessarily subscribe to the idea that we had to be engineered by angels or aliens, right? Because who knows how the evolution of the human spirit came to pass. For all we know, it could be through solar radiation, right, that causes the evolution of life. I've also heard theories that, as you guys hinted at earlier, that actually apes are evolving into the Stone Age. I don't know if this is true. I haven't read enough about it.
Joe Rogan says mushrooms.
Yeah. And then there's this idea that evolution towards sentience is actually almost baked into the universe. But that raises a question that I asked before, which is, given the massive survival advantage that language gives humanity, makes us masters of our domain, well, why hasn't that evolved earlier? Right now, and that's not to prove anything. It's just to posit that question. And I hesitate to fall into this idea that, because you can appear very smart to say that we're all a Clockwork Orange, that and because you're denying God, right? You're basically smarter than God. And this is something that, you know, Darwin was big into, was like explaining the Clockwork Orange. But the danger there is that you prove that an elephant is not a cabbage and therefore an elephant is a man. And yeah, I'm not sure I follow that reasoning. There is, nevertheless, there is a great deal about humanity that is very odd. And one of the things that you can say about it is we have an absolute fascination with the imaginary, right?
But
We
That's really because we've developed. Let me just jump in, guys. I've been here for a long time.
Melkor.
I get what you're saying, Toby. I totally understand. We have, through our evolution, we have been able to develop vocal cords that we can manipulate so easily. And as partly due to the fact that we discovered we were able to use fire early on. So we were able to cook meat. We weren't relying on like massive jaw muscles to plow through this raw meat. And that allowed selection, natural selection over time, to allow us to be able to produce complex speech. There is no other species on the planet that can produce complex speech like we can. So there is no other species on our planet that can formulate the ideas, discuss the ideas like we're doing right now. Like, yeah, you can see a bunch of chimpanzees sitting around and they're like, you know, making noises at each other and they're, you know, portraying emotion to each other. But to actually be able to sit down and have like a like existential like conversations of like, why are we here? Not like, what are we going to go
if I may interrupt, I'm not sure I follow. Melkor, if I can just clarify, just ask a question. When you say there's no other animal that can make sounds like us, what do you mean? Like, why can't a dolphin shape its sonar? Why can't a dolphin shape its sonar into grammatical syntax? Why can't a bird?
But the problem with the dolphin is it doesn't have hands and it can't make fire, so it can't smelt metal.
Yeah, but you were talking. Your earlier statement about the natural world was that it was the unique capacity to make sound which drove the evolution of the sentient.
I think he was just talking about that.
And if sentience is
on our mind to be able to take complex subjects and be able to discuss them and expand upon them. And also a lot of that's to do with it's not just a spoken language, it's also a written language when you can record that. Like I live in Canada, like almost all the indigenous people in Canada had no form of written language at all. It was only in the 1860s whenever there were these groups that went out to these native communities and they took their spoken language and developed it into a written language. Through that written language, then they can record their history as it happens, not rely on stories being handed down from person to person, spoken stories, which will always change.
Listen, Melkor, if I show you an animal and it's got no tail, do you know why it has no tail?
Because it's good. Because obviously it will
evolution, right? Evolution. Now, if I show you an animal with a very long tail, do you know why it's got a very long tail?
Because obviously it was useful for whatever
evolution, right? If I show you an animal with 2 legs, do you know why it's got 2 legs? Evolution. If I show you an animal with 4 legs, do you know why it's got 4 legs? Evolution. See, this is the brilliant thing about evolution. Evolution explains everything without actually explaining anything at all. Right?
Do you know why
it is
written language?
But it's actually by definition, because evolution is a process. It's one thing after another, right?
Yes.
And all things evolve.
We can watch it in real time.
Anything that passes through time evolves. But evolution is deceptive in a way, because it's very easy to explain, right, anything you want with evolution. All you're doing is describing a clockwork orange. Now, whether or not you believe...
Evolution doesn't mean that everything needs to go the same direction.
Yeah. I didn't say it did. You can get 2 legs, you can get 4 legs, you can get no tail, you can get a long tail. This is the thing. It doesn't really explain very much at all. It's just circumstance. It's one thing happening another. It's a stone rolling down a hill. And fundamentally what it is, right, it's a dead God. And that makes you God, right? Because if,
No, it doesn't.
if everybody's a clockwork
No.
orange
We
except
control
for me,
the
if my
evolution.
sentience is the only real one in the universe, I have displaced God. I have taken Jesus down off the cross and put myself up. And doesn't that make me special? Right. So this is why I am hesitant about reductionist arguments that seem to explain a great more than they do. And in the end, if you want to talk about a clockwork orange and a stone rolling down a hill and the myth of sentience, right, then you're talking about your own sentience being a myth as well. And that's a hard one. Anyway,
Drew.
Yes. First, if there's nothing to replace, then we're not replacing God. We're not replacing anything. There's nothing there to replace. So this whole idea of us using evolution to replace God, but there's no God, so we're not replacing anything. Okay, there are two things about evolution that I think
hang on, Drew. Are you a sentient being? Because if
Yes.
there is no God, and well, here's the thing. Okay, there's no God. There's no sentient entity in the universe except you, because the universe created
you're sentient.
you.
You're obviously talking to me right now.
Okay. Yeah, no, but what I'm saying is, you claim your own sentience is a miracle of the universe. You're claiming that through this miraculous. It's
no
pretty
miracle.
miraculous to have a sentient being, whether it's a god or whether it's you, right? Sentience is a miraculous. You're saying that you can reach into the warp. You can imagine things like a helicopter. You can make it manifest. You can reverse entropy, right? With your imagination, you can create things that never existed, right? Like the internet. This is a godlike power. So when you deny a higher sentience, all you're really doing is saying, I'm the only God in the universe. Because a God is a being that can reach into the warp, into the conceptual imagination and make it manifest in the material, right?
Okay, Toby.
So we are gods. And so
we're
the only gods is the question.
Okay.
Unless you're willing to say, I am also
Toby.
Orange, right?
Maybe you're a god.
I was destined to think these thoughts, and I'm not really alive.
True, man.
Okay, hang on. Toby,
after Drew,
wait.
After Drew.
Wait. Okay, Toby, we've heard your comments about this topic about 3 times over. If you're not gonna let us speak, we can't respond. Right? Let us finish.
We'll have a cry.
Let us finish our thoughts, and then we can have a discussion, right? Okay. So there are 2 things about evolution that I think is problematic in the way that you interpret it. First, you like to go back to like Darwin and supposed experts about it. They all got things wrong too. We cannot just depend on what they said to say, oh, evolution is right or wrong. They said a lot of right things, but they also got a lot of things wrong. And all of us will get something wrong. And 1,000 years later, some people will look back at us and say, well, Drew said, 20 things right and 1 thing wrong. Therefore, we just disregard everything he says. We can't do that. It's disingenuous. We pick the things that are right. And the things that he said is wrong, sure. Okay, he made a mistake there. We move on from there. And then we try to derive a good, realistic theory that we know based on what we know today. Right, so this idea about evolution going from one point to the next, like growing into each other, it's not really correct, because how genes work is genes is just a scaffolding of a bunch of code. So, for example, all humans today, we all have the genes to make a tail, and we all have the genes to have fur. So whether we actually use those genes to create the baby that then becomes an adult is actually from transcribing those the DNA. So using I think it's mRNA or something like that. I forget the name of the there's a field of science today that tries to figure out which DNA do you use to transcribe. So there are actually babies that are born with tails. There are babies that are born with fur. Then they actually for the ones with tails, they just chop it off, and then ones with fur, unfortunately, there are people that are born with webbed fingers, because once upon a time we were in the sea and we were actually. So all of that DNA.
Yeah, I saw a dog write a symphony the other day.
Yeah. So anyway, so it doesn't go like one into the next to the next. It is just we have all this scaffolding, and then mutations happen to those scaffoldings, and by luck something might happen to it, and one of these things might have a very beneficial mutation that is then transcribed, and maybe he's twice as strong. But probability and luck plays a lot of things into it. If this baby is very, very good, but when he's born, a lion comes along and eats it, it's gone. That great mutation is suddenly gone. So we are just lucky that we developed a brain that allows us to do all this sentient thinking and think back on ourselves and have this sense of identity. But we see in animals, a lot of them have the same kind of more rudimentary processes. Like, for example, my dog, I watch him dream all the time. He will do this and he'll go ow, ow, in his sleep. He's dreaming, you know? Like we see documentaries about elephants going for funerals. We see documentaries about chimpanzees forming gangs to go rape something, right? It's like the problem here is we have a very difficult time as humans conceptualizing the extreme expense of time that is required for evolution to take place, and extreme expense of time that it has taken to get us to this point, right? All we see is about 100 years behind us and ahead of us. We can't see the thousands and millions of years. Same concept with distance. We can't see the thousands and millions of kilometers it takes even to get to the moon. If you see an actual picture of a moon, you know, humans have a very difficult time conceptualizing large numbers. And that's why a lot of people can't grasp this concept of evolution, because to them, it's very impossible for a mutation to happen, but trillions of mutations are happening right now in all of us, you know? So one of them could be beneficial, you know, and then it gets extrapolated, maybe, you never know. And a lot of it is probability. So, okay, I'll let Atreyo go. I'm rambling.
Can I, Atreyo, I know that you want to speak, but can I make one small point? I just want to build up on what Drew has said, which is, I think Toby is kind of making an argument that is sort of based on the statistical impossibility, or so it seems, of human advancement in such a short period of time. But I think that we as humans, we try to apply linear logic to exponential things. And what I mean by that is that if you go from, in one day, if you go from 1 to 10, you only went up by 9. But then a couple days later, you've gone from 1 million to 10 million, and you've gone up by 9 million. But at the end of the day, you've still only increased by 1 order of magnitude, right? But the effect of that appears to us to be incredibly huge, right? And so we may only, and so in this analogy, right, chimpanzees may be at like level 56 and we may be at level 58, and we may only be 2 levels ahead of chimpanzees, and yet we are, you know, millions of times more advanced than they are. And we think, oh my God, how is it possible for us to even be in the same framework of levels as the chimpanzees are, because we're millions of times ahead of them? But we're only a couple of levels forward. It's just that those are exponential levels, right? I think that's also very important to remember with aliens. That might be 1 level above us. But I do want to go ahead and throw it to Atreyo. I just wanted to kind of connect those together.
Finally, it's my turn. I wasn't even finished in my last point, but obviously I forgot. But so there's 2 points. So remember, guys, 2 points. Let me finish these 2 points. So for one, the concept of evolution doesn't mean necessarily intelligence. To give you one example, which is the chimpanzees. So we developed a brain. Chimpanzees actually developed fucking muscle. So a 50-kilogram chimpanzee, if you look at the concept of what was from Einstein, EMC equals square, or no, something like that.
E equals MC square.
Yeah. So the reality is that we developed a brain because of necessity, and then the conditions were met. But chimpanzees actually evolved to develop muscle mass, because a 50-kilogram chimpanzee can defeat easily a man or a human being of 100 kilograms. So they have developed or evolved in a very different trajectory. So we shouldn't consider evolution as a concept of intelligence only or being able to speak only. Animals in general evolve in different variations based on needs, environments, and such. But this is just a topic that I want to throw off because obviously I want to go back to aliens. So evolution, it's done. This is it. So
no. Wait, I can. But later
wait,
I will continue
before
after you.
point number two.
Yeah.
Point number two. Okay, I'm going to number two. So here's the thing. So since religion was mentioned earlier, actually we tend to stay stuck on the concept of theology, which is the Abrahamic religions. For those who don't know, that's the Christianity, Judaism, and Islamic religions and such. But if you look at a step earlier, so that the paganistic religions, like the Romans had, the Greeks had, but also the Germanics had, and then if you go a little bit further, the Chinese had as well. So if you look at the gods that they believed in, for the Germanic gods, you had Lodovit, which is in the Viking religion is more common as Loki, but you also have Wodan, which is Odin. But then if you look at it from the Roman gods, Wodan would be Jupiter. And then in Greek gods, you had Zeus. And then you had the special place, so the heaven-like concept. In Germanic religion, it would be Valhalla. In the Roman or the Greek, I actually forgot the name, but they do have one. And if you go to the Chinese religions, where they had similar like gods, but there is also a similar like heaven place, which they called the seven rivers, or so there are many so you have
Heavenly Emperor's Court.
Yeah, pretty much. So basically it comes down to all of these different cultures, all of these different ethnic groups and languages and such, who have been separated by the course of not just 1,000 years, but 10 to 20 to 50 fucking thousand years. But the concept of their paganistic religions are relatively similar. And then sometimes it can be kind of one-on-one on each other. So you could say it's a natural evolution because we all come from one same place and then diverged out. Or maybe, just for the sake of the panel, aliens.
Okay, I want to go back to your first point. I just want to end the evolution thing. So that evolution also, like what Archimedes said, luck involved. There is no way a dolphin can ever start a fire because you have no hands. Yeah, it's in the water, which means dolphins could almost impossibly evolve into a level where they can compete with humans. It's just impossible. And not and so that apart, so human got lucky because there was records that humans almost went extinct. We just got by very lucky in Africa. We managed to escape that place and managed to thrive. We almost got extinct because we cannot survive in the whatever region in the central of Africa. But then I want to bring this to the more of the alienish thing, is that if you look at any ecosystem, there is always a balance. There is always a balanced ecosystem. There's a food web. If you look at dolphins, if as smart as dolphins are, there are predators to dolphins. Dolphins do not populate and grow like exponentially like human beings. Human beings are very odd because we literally defeated the food web. We totally we have evolved to a point where our brain power and the ability to use tools and language and ideas and concepts and scheming and whatever, and we develop a way that we can defeat the food web. We are totally outside of the food web. We have no predators. Even if they can eat us, we can wipe them out. We can extinct them. It's extremely not normal. this is, if you look at a lot of the Ring universe, where you have elves and orcs and trolls and whatnot, that world makes more sense for humans because we have natural rivals and predators that can control our population.
We're actually not. We haven't escaped fully from predators. There are things that eat us. We just can't see them.
Yeah, of course.
Bacteria,
of course.
viruses. There's still things we haven't fully gotten out of it yet.
Of course.
But we are
I'm not
almost
saying
there.
that we are. I'm not saying that we become immortal. I mean, even a mosquito can kill us. No, I'm just saying that in terms of the full web. Like if you look at the grand scale, we don't look at the small. I tell you, like even a freaking dog can defeat a lion. The lion will be like, what the hell? This dog is crazy. It's chasing after me. The lion will still run away. But I'm saying that in the macro scale of things, we have no predators. If you look at a lot of the sci-fi movies or fantasy worlds, they always have this crazy predator or invisible creature. If you look at aliens or whatnot, there is always this creature that will always keep that human race in check. They can never grow beyond. Like even in computer games like Diablo, the demons will make sure the humans will always be suffering. Then there'll be angels and demons, and humans can never thrive in the way how we do. If you look at the Mars, what's that Martian novel, where they also have different races. So human race on Earth is unusual. We are like the invasive species that went into a lake that we are not supposed to be there, and then we wipe out everyone, all the other fishes in the lake. Yeah, Atreyo.
I have a serious point on it, and then a lesser serious point. So to start with the serious one, so actually, we are not that unique. It's because during the Homo sapiens era, so the Paleolithic era, there were other hominin species like us that were just as intelligent. The difference is that we interbred with them and then outcompeted them. And then because of that, they simply went extinct. So we became superior by either conquest or they got...
we fucked them.
Pretty much. Yeah, we were better fuckers.
They're not extinct. They're part of us.
Yeah, kind of. They are part of us. And then to jump off to the lesser serious point in order to defend the dolphins. So I some time ago I watched quite an interesting documentary of a highly credible source called Hollywood, and then the dolphins were part of the kind of human god in the waters called Aquaman. We should definitely take them into consideration. Anyways, let's get back to aliens, man. I want to talk about Avatar.
Wait, just one statement I forgot to say, Wyatt, that dolphins can evolve eventually to overtake us. Just give them a few hundreds or millions of years. We started from fish anyway, so
only if they have.
Dolphins
they can
ancestors
evolve
are
hands
land
eventually.
animals. Dolphins ancestors are land.
They went back. They went back.
Like a bear.
So,
Look, if you think hands are good, if you think hands are good, then have you ever met an octopus? Okay, they have much better hands than we do. It's possible. Imagine an octopus dolphin.
Dolphins
if dolphins use their sonar to team up with octopi, right?
Yeah,
and then they develop fusion power under the water. Everybody could say, "Behold evolution."
Yeah.
The Clockwork Orange, isn't it amazing? Right? Like, this is the thing. Everything evolves. Mm-hmm. It's not. It. What you guys are talking about is the Clockwork Orange, right? The stone falling down the hill. It is evading the conceptual realm, right? Because human beings, we live in the conceptual realm far more than we live in the physical realm. As Wyatt is saying, we're pretty much devoted to getting ourselves out of the animal world. And what do? We go online. We play Warhammer. We go to church, right? We flee into the spiritual realm. It's kind of interesting. And if other animals did it, we could say that they evolved that too. I am not actually arguing against evolution in any way. And I'm certainly, I think Archimedes got me wrong. I am not making a distinction between levels of evolution. I'm making a qualitative distinction. Human beings are qualitatively different to the animal kingdom, right? It's not a question of we are more spiritual than animals. Animals.
We're a biological entity, same as any other animal.
We can, to use the
we die,
Warhammer
we rot.
analogy, we can reach into the warp, right? We can take
We
things
can.
from the imaginary realm. We can build a helicopter.
Yeah, we can.
We can imagine
Well,
things
you
like
can only build a
internet.
helicopter.
We can make
because
it
you can only build
manifest
a
in the world.
Like, wait. The evolution of building a helicopter is exactly the same as the evolution of an animal. Somebody had an idea, or somebody built something. Somebody else built something similar but more complex. Complexity increases over time. The first helicopter was designed by Leonardo da Vinci in the 1600s.
It was absolute shit. I worked on helicopters.
Toby, listen. If you want to say that it's if you want to say that it's a qualitative distinction, okay, then you have to say very specifically what the line is, and it cannot be a blurry line, because if it is a blurry line, then my argument that it's simply a large quantitative distinction that looks larger than you can imagine it to be, and therefore you look at it as a qualitative distinction, that applies. But if you can say this is the thing. It is, you know, maybe you're saying what it is what that distinction is the ability to have an imagination and to reach into the warp. Now that maybe, I don't know, but is that what you're saying? Are you saying that is the thing?
Is that not the defining characteristic that we would demand of aliens if we were shown them? Because otherwise I can show you an octopus and say the octopus is an alien, but you're like, well, it's not really sentient. So
well, how do you know that a dog doesn't? How do you know that a dog doesn't go into the warp and create concepts in its head? How do you know?
Well, because it doesn't fly around a helicopter.
Well, you don't fly around in a helicopter. You're in a chair right now. That doesn't mean that you're.
No, wait. People, stop about helicopters. Stop about helicopters.
Why?
I made them fly.
Back on the aliens.
I worked on fucking
helicopters.
Here's the history of the helicopters. Da Vinci and his super magnificent fantasy actually was inspired by a leaf. So you have certain kind of leaves that when it drops off, it propels into the sky. That was his inspiration to develop a similar system that would propel. That, in the end, was the start and beginning, or rather the so-called evolution of the helicopter. And then over time, this propeller, or rather rotary system, got developed. It's because what they figured out is that wings that rotate in a particular form could create lift. The problem is that when there's only a single rotary, the body would turn. So they build an auxiliary rotary.
And listen, if a dog did that, I'd be like, welcome to the sentient world, brother. And I'd say, what a miracle.
No, I will kill the dog.
I'd say that dog has spirit. The whole
I will
on that dog.
kill the dog. I will make sure that the dog dies instantly.
No. The thing is that the dogs, they didn't develop it because they didn't need to develop it. But if you look at the concept of
dogs.
Dogs got manipulated into a dumbed down version of a wolf that was controllable. But if you look at it from a helicopter perspective, if you go to the Aztecs of it, there's actually a portrayal of a creature sitting in a vessel that looks like a rocket that shoots out of space that brings back aliens, because this is the alien UFO panel. Maybe we should reconsider on the topic.
I want to add on the Da Vinci helicopter. If you look at evolution, the Da Vinci helicopter actually died out. So they evolved this thing, right? And then it just went extinct because it fucking failed. And then evolution returns the same idea but in a slightly different way, and then that got capitalization and people ready to throw money at it and then make it work. And then it evolved and successful. So every evolution is the same. There is always try and error, and then they fucking create a dolphin on land and the fucking dolphin just die because it cannot.
I'm telling you, it's aliens, man. It's aliens.
Let Melkor go.
Okay, so this is the thing, right? So if there are aliens, so the human race, everybody says we're different from everything else, right? What is the one thing that the human race has done through its existence? Expand, find new land, conquer, explore. Well, we can't do that anymore here because what's left to explore here? So the only thing left to us is to expand outwards. And if there is something else out there that has been visiting us, then how can we possibly ever expand outwards? Because whatever that is so far ahead and advanced of us that all we can really do is just stay here and wither.
And kill ourselves.
No, I want to
that's why
expand
I'm
on
like,
If
this.
the aliens are out there, if the aliens are from
Yeah,
the fourth dimension, then we can expand because there are no aliens out there.
So just
well,
for
that's the thing. If it is fourth dimensional, Drew, like you say, then we're okay. But if they are like us, like a physical, biological species that's so far advanced of us, like it's not looking good, boys.
no, but so I actually want to expand on Melkor's concept, because currently our planet is being exhausted exponentially. So the next best way forward would be colonizing planets. Mars is technically or theoretically it's colonizable, but it needs conditioning. Venus is easier to colonize, but the problem is that conditions are only at the upper surfaces rather than the lower surfaces. So it would need to be conditions. And then in this regard, if we were to colonize planets and then also consider the concept of space mining, which is being extremely well researched and developed and such, we would be the aliens. And then there have already been hypotheses that on a moon on Jupiter there is an expectation of life. It's just that it's not on the surface. It's below an ice cape. So there are concepts of life available, but maybe we are the expected aliens in this regard. It's because so far intergalactic travel hasn't been conceptualized, at least by us, so maybe not by other species as well.
It's been
Like, there's a
conceptualized,
possibility
just not
that
operationalized.
Sorry, Drew?
Melkor, it's been conceptualized, just not operationalized.
But the thing with it is too, though, right? Like, if we wanted to like go to other planets and colonize them, like there's a possibility that we can engineer ourselves to be more suitable to that environment, right? Like, so like we have like the ability to genetically engineer human beings. We could make ourselves more resilient to heat, to cold, to whatever, right? Like they genetically engineer crops now, so you can grow corn in northern climates using like a gene out of a fish from the Arctic. So like that is massively increased the amount of food that we can produce, genetic engineering. So like people say that GMO crops, it's a terrible thing, but it has really solved the problem of world hunger for all of its faults. And like there's something very similar to
Also,
do
we
with
can
us.
condition planets.
That takes a long time. It'd be much faster to condition us. It'd be much faster to condition a human being. And,
in
and the
10,000
other
years,
thing
we
is
are
too,
all...
with what like, especially with what Elon Musk's working on, like with this like brain chip and all the rest of it. Like there is a possibility we may be able to download our consciousness into like an inanimate body, so like a robotic body, but it will have our consciousness in it, and then that maybe that's what's visiting us from. Like that's something then that could travel for thousands of years, without like dying.
If you really want to condition the human to like be able to live in other planets, I think the most efficient way is just to grow our brains bigger and bigger and bigger, and then you end up looking like the aliens, the one with the big head. Because once you have a bigger brain, they can think of a better solution.
I was thinking, because you talk about like modifying our bodies to be able to travel outer space, right? I was thinking like, in 10,000 years we all look like the Greys. They'll be like all
No,
these
so
gray.
actually,
the argument about colonizing other planets and terraforming is kind of interesting because it's so ridiculous when if you give it careful thought. It's like if we have the knowledge and the technology to terraform Mars, right, then we can terraform the Sahara, right? In other words, we can fix this planet. If we're even 1/1,000,000th of the way to fixing other planets that are currently inhospitable, then we can fix this one up, right? And we can stop abusing it, and we can actually grow a garden here and not destroy our own special spaceships. So the whole thing about like needing to go colonize because doom, everything's running out and the sea levels are rising and all this kind of thing. It's like, it's a good story, but it doesn't make any sense. And this ties it into another aspect, which is like people fear aliens, right? Because they assume that aliens are going to behave in an animalistic way, right? They are going to be like the chimps hunting other chimps. They're going to see us as nothing but resources. They're going to walk all over us. They're not going to find us interesting. Now, that's kind of weird because, like, look at us. If we're struggling to survive, we're going to kill what we can to eat it, right? But once we're comfortable, what do? We make national parks. We make nature documentaries. We begin to study nature. We begin to cultivate it, and we begin to see it as our domain. So it doesn't make much sense that we're going to end.
No. Actually,
we're not going to encounter
hunting,
spacefaring alien species. It's more primitive than us.
Hunting.
No, because we're not that ascended, Toby.
If you follow the logic, right? If they're spacefaring, right, they probably don't need Earth's resources. You know,
maybe
what I mean?
they're spacefaring
harvest the energy from a star. You know, like it's unlikely that the aliens are going to be like barbarians compared to us now. So we might expect that they're even more spiritual in terms of like living in the conceptual realm. Because after all, where did they get all their technology from? Presumably they, like us, reached into the warp and made it manifest in the materium, right? Because otherwise they're just like Tyranids, they're space bugs, right? So anyway.
So before Drew goes, I'm sorry, Drew, I'm taking this. So technically speaking, we can fix this planet already. A very good example is the Lis Plateau in China. And then there are concepts already being practiced in several areas of the Sahel, which is the Sahara Desert area in Africa. And then there's also experiments run in the desert area of South America. They can already fix this planet, technically speaking and practically speaking. It's just that business comes first. Expansionism actually does play a role, and whoever gets into space matters. Because if you think about it, that the Soviets and the Americans, they had this so-called space race. And now the Chinese, they have successfully developed a whole space program individually or separated from the rest of the world. And then India is now coming up, also trying to develop a space program individually. People are trying to conquer whatever is next. So you have to understand expansionism, trying to conquer whatever that we can, is somewhere also a little bit part of our nature. So we need to understand ourselves first, and then in some ways we can accept ourselves as to being the aliens in this regard. Is because if we can perform terraforming on Mars, for example, or build a base on Moon, which China is currently trying to actually do, that's going to be our direction. It's because we do want to be better than the other party. And then this is the competition, or rather the eternal battle of ourselves in some way. And then this is also how we improve and develop further.
Atreyo, thieves have the biggest locks, but that doesn't mean every man is a thief.
No.
Well,
but this is also evolution.
Yeah,
if human race have to survive, this is what we do. So this is evolution. If you look at ants, they do exactly the same thing. The ants will just spread, and then they'll try to colonize new places. They find new food, they're going to colonize that place. This is just evolution. If we don't do that, we are going against our natural instinct to survive as a species. So no, please.
And I want to just make a small point before I toss it to Drew. I am sorry, Drew, but you know, I'm sure that in Castile in the 1480s, there were plenty of people that were building gardens and national parks, but there were some that went off on voyages and did some and expanded, right, and killed and murdered. So it doesn't have to be the nature of a species does not have to be a uniform thing. There can be some that are good and nice and ascended and building national parks and making music, and then just some that go on expeditions and go and just exterminate other planets and take their resources. It's entirely possible for both to happen.
So this brings us into good and bad aliens, and there are theories, right, that there are many different types. I think I've heard up to like 7 or something.
Yeah.
Drew.
What are your thoughts on that,
Drew?
Drew?
Thank you.
Drew's up.
My thought about good and bad aliens is that, okay, I personally believe that we have been visited by aliens, that they have been here before. Okay, so because like Bob Lazar and all those guys, there is some credible evidence that they have been here, that the Egyptians and whatnot, right? So fact number 1 to me is that they have been here. Fact number 2 is that I'm still alive. I'm not a slave. I'm talking with you guys over here. I'm enjoying my life, So the fact that, and fact number 3 to me is that they are technologically far more advanced than us because they are here. We don't know they're here and they've been here. So if you take these 3 facts put together, it tells me that for some reason the aliens haven't enslaved us. They are here, they have been here, they can get here, they can kill us or enslave us or take our resources, but they haven't. So there could be some senate somewhere in another planet where they are debating this, like, okay, should we just kill off the humans and take their stuff? Or, and then we could have survived by 1 vote. And they say, oh, no, let's save the hairless monkeys, they're cute. We like to watch them on our TV, or for some other... We don't know why they haven't killed us. Well,
this is the Ridley Scott Prometheus, theory.
Yeah, so I think that the aliens, they are not good or evil, but for some reason they haven't killed us, so I'm quite happy about that.
Vaun?
So I think Vaun, go first. Vaun, go first. I'm after you.
I think the aliens are benevolent. That's what they are. That's probably where the concept of God came in. Because the aliens are here. Sometimes they intervene. Sometimes someone's magically healed. Sometimes somebody did something to piss them off, and things
I wanted
happen.
to bring up. Sorry, to add on to what you said about them being benevolent. The number of alien sightings actually went up tremendously after each nuclear explosion. So they saw us do some stupid shit, like split an atom and blow up something. So they came and looked what are these hairless monkeys doing?
Some people say they're here to kind of keep an eye on us to make sure we don't go too far.
The hairless monkeys aren't killing themselves. Okay, fine. It's all okay. Let's go home.
But that might be where you get the whole idea of God is they're benevolent. They don't really interfere. When they want to show themselves, they do. And since it's so advanced, whether you're a caveman or a businessman in Manhattan, you don't know what the hell you just saw. So it's amazing. So, because really, if they could travel through time and space or whatever, and they wanted this out of the way, we'd be gone. Like you said, Drew, it's perfect. You're here talking. That's proof that they're probably not evil.
And if they are benevolent and they are here, then what kind of forms are they taking on this planet if they're actually taking an active role in this society?
The lizard people, man.
That's what I'm saying.
People.
Melkor.
Take off your mask, you lizard man.
Well, there are angels and demons in mythology, so it's interesting to think about like different xeno races that might have a different idea about humanity. Particularly if we are a creation of one xeno race and like they have a beef.
Do you guys remember the show
stepping on us might be like a poke in the eye to them.
You remember the show in the 80s, B?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, check it out. It's crazy. It's like these reptilian aliens come to Earth, but they look like people. But then they like unhinge their jaws and eat rabbits and shit. It's funny, but it's the whole alien people under human skin shit. It was pretty good. I think for the 80s, it was pretty good.
I just don't see why we would just automatically assume that they'd be benevolent. Like they developed the technology to get themselves off their own world. They obviously exploited the resources on that planet to get off there. So by definition, they're not benevolent to begin with.
I-
maybe
I
they
do-
didn't
I
leave.
honestly-
Maybe they
I
didn't
think
leave to
it's-
get off. Maybe they're on
I think
vacation.
if we-
What's your response to
if we-
Drew's argument to that? Drew responded to that by saying that he's not dead yet, right? So why is Drew not dead yet? Why is he not enslaved yet? If they are so evil,
We're not a threat.
Yeah.
So
we're
I
We're
not-
can
not a
add.
threat.
That could be why. That could be why.
So
Like,
this comes
but
back
we
to
need
the
to make ourselves a threat because we need to make sure that we survive. Because the Empire of Man, like
We are
40K, the
inferior.
Imperium it's not gonna happen if we don't get our asses in gear and start
So actually I
developing
can
something
share.
here.
No,
Okay,
but
share.
also you have to also understand the concept of inferiority. If you can travel from galaxy to galaxy, and we cannot, we can build nukes and shit, and then we think this is the shit. But if you can actually travel interstellarly, then you are significantly more superior. Whatever they have is going to be outclassing the nuclear in every regards aspect. Maybe the nuclear bomb
sure
for them is just
I'm sure 50 cal still does some damage though.
No, there's stories. There's stories of UFOs being over nuclear sites and stuff, and communication sites, and killing the signals and shutting the systems down. So, I mean, if they can travel through the galaxies, I'm sure they can flip a switch and do an EMP and just turn everything off.
So I can actually share about.
I mean, like you said, we're not a threat. We're not.
I think when they visited us, it was maybe like 50,000 years ago, maybe more, when they did visit us. That's where a lot of our myths come from, and they haven't been back. And they have no idea what's going on here, and we better get our shit in gear before they do come back.
So the ancient astronaut or ancient alien theory is actually the one that I think is the most credible. Is actually the aliens arrive at Earth. They want to exploit our resources, mainly gold. They needed gold for whatever reasons. I read it was something. I heard it's something to do with the energy propulsion or something. They needed gold. So, but the thing is, they don't want to do it themselves. So they don't do they because maybe the crew is not a lot, So they adjust the DNA of the apes that they can find. They find the most the best animal that they can actually exploit, maybe the closest to what they look like, with two hands. So they DNA and adjust.
So we can go and take the goal.
So
that's like that movie Cowboys and Aliens.
Yeah,
so that's why we love gold so much, huh? Because it's true, right? It's interesting in monetary theory that gold is such a attractive thing to humans. For some reason, we fucking love gold. I've always loved gold.
Maybe it's like you're saying.
Why do you love Bitcoin?
Like Archimedes was saying, maybe it's genetically in our DNA to love gold, because for millions of years we mined it for the aliens.
So I want to come back to the.
That's why
this is all based on Zachariah Sitchin, right? You guys are aware of Zachariah Sitchin and the Annunaki?
If gold was worthless, does anybody here actually like gold? You take a piece of gold and you look at it. It's nothing. It's a shiny piece of. It's not even shiny. You look at real gold.
Shiny. It's ugly.
It looks like mud.
So
gold
let me finish my story. So
women like gold.
So let me finish my story. So this
we
is
like
happening.
it because there's value. That's all.
So these hairless monkey slave were doing all this mining for the gold and whatnot. Then eventually there was this. I'm not sure what is the impetus. There was a split between the aliens. There's one group, I think they want to exterminate the humans. There's another group that wanted to save the humans, or to make them not slave, something like that. Then the aliens actually fought a war on Earth. So then they actually links it with the Hindu, the Hindu fight between the good and evil gods and whatnot. So that's where you get the good and evil aliens, or good and evil gods or whatnot. That way they have this massive war. In the end, humans was given technologies that we are not supposed to have, like the concept of fire and whatnot. Then in the end, they left, and then humans were left on their own. Maybe the good side won the war. Maybe the bad side gave up. They don't want to fight anymore. Then they left. So whatever reason it is, we survived and then we are still around. We did not die. But that was a story, and it makes a lot of sense to me because like I said, I personally don't. I think that the evolution of human beings is a little bit abnormal. We feel like an invasive species in the lake. That's how I look at humans. That it just makes no sense to me. We could have been like a dolphin. We could have been like apes or chimpanzees, baboons. But you see, all these creatures never dominate the entire savannas and the oceans. But we did it for whatever reasons. So that makes a lot of sense to me, and that's also why we have this sense of gods and deities and whatnot. Yeah,
Ants dominate every continent on Earth, but
and they
do
get
it
eaten by anteaters. No, but they get eaten by anteaters.
We get eaten by bacteria and viruses. I mean, half of you isn't even you.
Okay, I'm going to
the
interject
biological-
here to fill out the story, right? Because I am shamefully aware of Sitchin's writings and his theories. So the story with the Anunnaki is as follows. It's like Wyatt said. They came here, they wanted the gold. It was to fix their atmosphere on Nibiru, their planet, which for whatever reason needed gold in the atmosphere to stop it degrading. Like he said, they were subject to our radiation because their planet is a lot further from our sun, so they got sick here. They wanted to build a domestic workforce, so they genetically engineered not only us, but all the domestic animals for food, right? So we were like the domesticated ape, right? But then, apparently, according to Sitchin's version of events, it was really difficult to make us and we couldn't breed. We were like a mule, right? And so they were trying to get us to be able to breed so that they would have a stock of these pack animals that had opposable thumbs, which are very useful. And then the guy who was in charge of all this was named Enki, and his wife, who I believe was named Ningazita, was the medical officer. And her ark, her spaceship, was located at Baalbek. And she didn't just make the domestic animals. Apparently she made griffins and all kinds of other mythical animals, unicorns and so on. But then they didn't go into serial production. But we did. And the way that Ningazita was able to get human beings to breed was that she mixed her own blood, right, with the blood of a hominid.
Sorry.
This is the thing, the blood of a god. But what that did was it gave us sentience, right? And then Enlil, who was the brother of Enki and the leader of the mission on Earth and the prototype for the sky gods of thunder and lightning, like Zeus and the rest of it, that was Enlil. He got properly pissed because it's not that he didn't like human beings, but the Anunnaki had a rule, which was that sentient beings had to worship God, like that could, because they had a sense of the divine as well. And they had rules against slavery. And so what he said is, you've just ruined our pack animal because now it's sentient and now we break our own laws on slavery if we don't encourage it. And so from that point, there was a big meeting back on Nibiru, and An, the Sky Father, met whoever it was they took with them. And this is supposedly one of the books left out of the Bible about the Watchers and some dude who goes off to meet God and so on. And then once they decide that we are a sentient race, they decide they have to teach us, right, to worship the divine and to be like them and so on. But anyway, that's the Zachariah Sitchin story. That's the story of the Anunnaki.
And the Adam and Eve, right? That's
I think
also
it's
the story of
detailed.
Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
So I have a story
Yeah,
of Adam and Eve.
it marries very closely with not only Genesis, but the books that were left out of the Bible. Because there were a whole bunch of books to choose from. There were like the Book of the Watchers, the Book of the Nephilim, and so on and so forth. But how much like Sitchin was making up and how much he's basing on mythology is, that's an open question. I don't know enough about that.
Adam and Eve, they were the first two people on the planet. They got married. They had two kids, Cain and Abel. And then Cain and Abel got married. To who? Where
To
these
his mom.
mystery bitches come from?
To his mom. His mom.
Yeah, the mom.
Man, these
That's
people
not actually how the genealogy goes, but yeah.
No, but where these mystery bitches come from? It's very simple. Somewhere something doesn't add up. I'm telling you, it's
Chimpanzees.
aliens, man.
Chimpanzees.
Man.
Oh, the
No, but
aliens.
actually, somewhere very long ago, I wanted to make a point. So I read into
In ancient history.
Yes. So I once saw a concept or a video concept of what Greys were to actually represent, but then instead of the Greys being aliens, they were time travelers of human species. Because I think Wyatt mentioned it of we evolving into Greys, but this has actually already been realized into a concept. I will try to find the video and then I will send it into the DPA lounge to give you how the concept has been visualized. But basically, it comes down to the point is that we humans will evolve in such a manner that our brains get bigger and that our eyes get bigger, all the way into the concept of what we would call the Greys, and then have the capacity and the technology and the knowledge to travel back into the past. So, in a way, maybe the aliens that we might see are not even aliens, but just the future us. But there is also another concept we could look into. Is I think Toby touched on this before. Is the idea of Prometheus? So engineering race comes down and technically develops the humans, but then this is all within the realm of speculations. My fantasy is running out. I'm tired. It's already 3 o'clock midnight here.
Vaun.
The stream's
Hey, I
gone
was just
2
gonna
hours,
say-
so after Vaughan, we should wrap up.
Okay, yeah, I was just gonna say, in like relation to what Atreyo was saying before we started, if you guys look on YouTube, there's a guy called Art Bell, and he's an old AM radio host that used to do like a 5-hour night show, and it's all archived in there. Bob Lazar, the Greys, the interdimensional stuff, the time traveling, the Greys are us. I mean, it's a very extensive archive. I mean, it's broken down probably by segments too. So I think if you go to like coasttocoastam.com, you can find shows there. And on Saturday nights across the United States, depending on the time slot, they usually run an archive show of his for 2 or 3 hours. And it could be any time. It's crazy to hear a show on Saturday night talking about the first Clinton scandal and stuff going on back then, and what he was predicting or what they were saying was going to happen, and then nothing happened or something happened or whatever. It's just, with the UFO stuff, there's a lot of really cool stuff and a lot of really good guests on there for people to look into. And that's all I got.
Toby.
Well, I'd like to give a shout out to the I don't actually know, it's the Ancient Astronaut channel. The reason I recommend it is not because I subscribe to any of it, but it's just got very good production values. It's very well done. It's easy to watch and digest. So if you're at all interested in Zecharia Sitchin's work and his theories and the Annunaki and all of these theories, then it's very interesting and it's very well produced. So that's the Ancient Astronaut channel, I think. You'd have to look it up. It's got a little symbol. But I recommend it to anyone who's bored. But anyway, listen, thanks, guys. Thanks for coming on the panel. I never know how these things translate until after I then go back and watch them. But yeah, thank you all for turning up and taking this topic very seriously.
Yeah,
Thank you
Toby.
everyone for
Thanks,
watching
everyone.
this DPA panel. So this DPA panel about UFO that we branch out to aliens and evolution and whatnot. So thank you everyone for watching.
Let's
Thank
do
you
a closing.
everyone
Let's
for-
do a closing by the table.
Yeah.
Okay, closing, and everybody has to say what they actually believe. Right, very quickly. Start
I'll
with
go
Wyatt.
first. I do believe that there's aliens. I do think some of it's possibly alien technology and some of it's probably human technology. I think a lot of the stuff being released is maybe more of a distraction than them trying to really tell us anything, because all you're seeing is vague images and reports from people who are credible, but they don't know what they saw, and the government's really not going the extra mile to kind of dispel anything or help in solve. I mean, there's no hearings, there's no in-depth reports. It's just mentioned here and there on different news channels. So, I mean, we'll see what happens.
True.
So, to make my closing complete, I think we exist and therefore aliens exist. When it comes to us meeting them or them meeting us and then excluding other dimensions, I would say we have never met them. And if we met them, we would be dead or colonized pretty much, simply because we are inferior to them. So I would say, yeah, there are aliens, and I don't think they are so friendly because we like them to be. That's it for me. Thanks, Toby. It was an interesting topic. We had a good time.
My opinion is there's a possibility that we were visited a very long time ago, maybe 50,000 years ago, whenever we were still like undeveloped. And there's a chance that they could come back. So we need to be ready, and we need to be expanding and developing our technology, not only for whenever that occurs, but just so that we continue as a species. Because, you know, as much as we try to like conserve the earth, like there are certain things that we require to survive that will be exhausted, and we need to get off this rock. And Elon Musk has the right idea. And I just want to like say what Vaun had said about Art Bell. I discovered Art Bell whenever I moved to Canada, and a very entertaining man. I really enjoy listening to his shows. So yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. And yeah, the truth is out there.
Drew.
Well, I believe that there are aliens and they have visited us before. And given the number of sightings, credible sightings over the years, it seems they do keep coming to visit us once in a while. I think they are not they're not evil or good in that sense, but they do have their own decision-making mechanisms, and for some reason they have decided to leave us alone to develop our own technology. They do get worried when we do dumb shit like throw a nuclear bomb, because they do visit us a lot after that, right? So I do think that we need to forget our own stupid shit like race and LGBT and all of those identity politics and whatnot. We are all humans. We need to work together to actually develop ourselves, not for the fear of, you know, the aliens coming to conquer us, because if they wanted to, they would have already, I think, you know, but so that in that very unlikely scenario, you know, we need to get ahead of ourselves and also, like what Melkor said, get off this rock and develop to a point where we can actually self-sustain indefinitely. And also, if the aliens do decide to come, we actually have a fight. We can put up a fight, you know. So it's yeah, I think they're there. I think they're already here. It's just but we shouldn't, you know, be developing for the sole purpose of fighting them, because once they realize that, they'll squish us before we have a chance, you know. So we just develop quietly, you know? Like pretend, oh no, we are peaceful. We're just making this proton blaster for shooting elephants, you know, not for killing.
So I think that truth is stranger than fiction, and fiction is really fucking strange. So I want to believe.
Oh, that's a very short closing. So I shall do my closing as well. Because Toby said to tell the truth. The truth is, I really hate to be an NPC. We are all NPCs. The reality is, if you watch Marvel movies, you know, you have all the aliens and all the crazy shit happening, all the superheroes. But if you really think about it, everything happens without most of the people of the world knowing what's happening. We think that, wow, Captain America is so heroic, you know, Thor is so cool, you know, fighting in his stupid, crazy of outer space. None of this happens with anyone knowing anything. If you look at Men in Black, you know, the movie where they have all the aliens, right? Same thing. There is an entire universe and of secret society of all these, you know, secret agreements and all the aliens actually, you know, coming to Earth and with checkpoint, passport, whatnot. Entire group of police and special agents protecting the secrecy of all these beings, aliens, all pretending to be human beings. Nobody knows anything, and I really hate to be that kind of NPC. You know, we are living in the world. Maybe all these things are happening, but we are just so not important. So we don't know, and I really hate to be that. You know, that's why I created DPA, because I don't want to be NPC. but that's just what we are, and I really hate to be that, which is why, you know, I intrigued by all these theories. hoping to know more about it, but actually the reality is we are just not important. Okay, that'll be.
Okay, well, listen, thank you guys, and thank you to anyone who's watched it this long. You clearly have too much time on your hands. My position is I feel that I am a creature of spirit and not flesh. I live in an imaginary world most of the time, which some of you may have picked up on. But I don't mind that. Like, I enjoy imagination. I enjoy discourse. I enjoy ideas. And I like to think that we need each other. We need people, right? Like our parents die. We create more family for ourselves so that we have these other psychic entities that love us. And that's our sustenance. That's our deal, right? Like, we all need that or we get very unhappy. So often I think, we are children of God. We are children of a higher sentience that created us so that he'd have a family, right? So that's how I see it. I see the aliens as angels or demons or whatever, but I see us all as part of a family. And I think that when we mature, right, evolve, whatever you want to call it, but I think that if we focus on that, and if we're positive, and if we don't fear, right, we don't fear things, and we reach into the warp with good intentions, then we're not going to create any chaos gods. And so I kind of, I go in that direction. I'm a spiritual being, and I'm sure the aliens are too, because otherwise it doesn't make a lot of sense. Doesn't make much sense anyway, but you must be positive about it. And on that note, thank you all.
So thank you everyone for watching, and
Thanks everyone.
Thank you for watching. Bye, and I'll see you in the
Thanks, Wyatt. Thanks, Toby.
update.